Hi, welcome to Just Out of Curiosity, a podcast that talks about sex and sexuality from the lens of a sex-positive brown woman that has a fascination with alternative or non-conventional lifestyles. My name is Shelly D, and I am that sex-positive brown woman. Over the course of several episodes, I'm excited to dive into topics that titillate my interests and make me ask my guests questions just out of curiosity. And so, my curiosity today leads to gender expression and identity. I'm going to brace you now. This pre-reflection is going to be a little bit long. I have a lot to say about this. I'm really passionate about this subject. I hear lots of talk about trans people and questioning or not understanding things in parts about trans issues. I hear less of people actually talking to trans people to understand what that disconnect is with gender identity and how we express ourselves. I'll admit, I too am still learning, actually unlearning the quote unquote ways of how I was told to be and live by a cisgendered run society. I still refer to the difference between sex and gender because when I went to university a good 20 years ago, that was still the topic. Sex was your biological makeup and gender was socially constructed. Since then, I've learned that was a very specific way of looking at it. Things have now updated. You can tell me that a woman is someone born with a vulva and a uterus, but then I can ask, what about people born intersex? There are people that are born with genitals that seem to be in between the usual male and female types. Intersexuality reflects real biological variation. Well, then you can tell me that a woman is someone who has estrogen and progesterone and menstruates. But then I can tell you, and I really think that at this point, most people that do menstruate have irregularities with their hormones and menstruation. I don't think you really know someone who menstruates that has a regular period at this point in our lives. My body naturally started producing more testosterone at some point because I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, or otherwise known as PCOS. Would that make me more of a man? Though my friends and I could argue that I am manlier than some of my male friends, it still doesn't really answer the question. The thing with being non-binary, gender non-conforming, and even trans is that there is a beauty in living outside of these labels and buckets we think needs to be assigned to everyone. There's a beauty in embracing the feminine and masculine energies in us and expressing them when it needs to be done. At least I really do think it's a beautiful thing. But I also find beauty in chaos. And when you find the blend between living your most authentic self by challenging some really useless norms that spend more time dividing people instead of bringing them together, that is what life is. What I really think is there's a lack of compassion. We've gotten so used to living with labels and in binaries that when people try to move outside of that, we spend more time comprehending why they would want to do that and what that could potentially mean for folks that conform, instead of being compassionate about the struggles and even violence that belong to those that don't. In less words, to those that joke about this issue and say, well, if I want to identify as a pineapple, why can't I? Or, a pig is most like us genetically. Why can't I identify as a pig if I want to? That's when you can identify the privilege we have as cisgendered folks that don't feel an expectation to perform in certain ways because of their genitalia. And I truthfully think if we all sat down and think about certain personality traits and roles that have been assigned to us from family, media, and society around us that we don't like. If you ever stop to ask why that role exists and why it was thrust on you, whether you like it or not, do you have to keep doing it because everyone else does? I've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. And I do think a lot of us spend a lot of time boxed into this role that has been attributed to us. Now, there are a lot of takeaways I have after this conversation with Diana that I had to make this a two-parter. Diana is someone I met at work a couple years ago. She identified as non-binary, and I didn't really understand what that meant. Before that time, I probably would have thought it ridiculous to put my preferred pronouns in my email signature or anything because I clearly identified as a woman, and I assume most would read my name as a woman using she, her pronouns. I've since changed after realizing all my short-sightedness and ignorance. Outside of my jokes about having penis envy and actually being envious of how much power a penis can hold in and out of the bedroom, I have no idea what gender dysphoria feels like and why someone feels the need to transition. But why do I need to understand it? There are so many other things happening in society that I don't understand, but I just accept or let be. Why do we all have to understand and comprehend something? Because, let's be honest, we're all just being hypocritical in that area. We don't understand everything that happens around us to be okay with it first. Why can't we lead more with compassion? Who cares if you don't understand why someone wants to transition? They are still a person going through something with feelings and emotions. I'm learning more and more that maybe I need to check myself and how I see the world and understand that not everyone lives my life with my experiences, much like I won't live through someone else's experiences to understand them. What I'm trying to do is listen more. If someone wants to answer my questions, then I will ask, and Diana let me ask. I love her for that because, as G.I. Joe taught me, knowing is half the battle. What you do with the other half is up to you. Diana, it's been a while since I last seen you. You're now in Vancouver.
Hey, doll.
How are
Yeah.
you?
Doing good. Doing
Is it
great.
is it rainy in Vancouver right now?
It is currently not raining, but kind of wet.
That could be used to describe so many things right now.
Oh, man.
How has been living on the West Coast been for you?
It's been great. Like, just the West Coast lifestyle is so much more slower paced and more emphasis on just like getting out into nature or just being around nature. And it's not, Vancouver is not a 24-hour city like how Toronto is. So, late night eats after the bar, you're limited. But other than that, it's been really good.
Yeah, you've got the
Um,
nature around you.
yeah, like I'm looking at the mountains and the ocean right here. So,
And I get to look at condos in a concrete
yay.
jungle. I started a contract position at a TV station and I saw you. We worked on the same floor. I have to say, I don't know if I've actually said this to you, but there was something about I'm drawn to people's energy, and there's
Mhm.
something about you that I absolutely loved. And I think because you were different, I hadn't experienced someone like you in that you had identified as non-binary at the time, but
Yeah,
there were days that you would come into the office wearing high heels. There were days that you come into the office wearing makeup, and
yeah.
it didn't feel odd. It didn't feel different. I'm sorry if that means if saying odd is weird, but it
No,
just it suited you and your personality, and I was just drawn to it, and I wanted to know more. Um, so I asked you for drinks under the guise
yeah,
of I want to pick your brain as to your job because
yeah.
I like the job that you had, but I didn't really know what non-binary meant at the time,
Okay.
and I I I knew that there was something that was intriguing about it, and the conversation that we had it really really resonated with me. I don't think I'd actually had conversations with people that were either gender non-conforming or just trying to move outside of that bucket. Could
Hmm.
you talk to me a little bit more about this notion of non-binary, what that meant for you? How have
Hmm.
you experienced that in your life?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, where to start
I
on
know it's a big question.
that? Well, one thing I want to say up front is that every trans experience is different,
Yes.
even uh, non-binary folks, some identify as trans. They feel that is under the trans umbrella. Some feel that is different.
Mhm.
Right? And so labels are often very arbitrary and personal. And that's why people should be allowed to choose their own labels. But for me, I started to realize that I don't even know how to word this. Just that something was different, that like, and I was like in my early 30s, like, it took me a
Mm.
while to get there. I identified as a gay man for a long time.
Okay.
And so I I realized though that something was different and something I'd been very unhappy about for a long time. And I realized in some way I connect to the trans experience. I realized I am trans. And then it was like, okay, what next? Right? Like I
Yeah.
realized that, okay, I think that label fits me. I think what I see in the trans community, that I identify with that. And um, I think the things that had given me a lot of turmoil in my life and um, led to a lot of like unhealthy behaviors. But yeah, like I just realized that there was something I needed to explore there.
No, you said that you thought about being the thought of transness came like how did that manifest like even from you being a child? Like did you think anything different?
Oh yeah, I mean when I was a kid, I wanted to be a woman. Like I like loved all the female characters and everything. When we played house, I was
Uh-huh.
always a woman. Like
Okay.
before I was taught that that's not okay, right? Like it was just part of the making believe, the like, playing in these situations, playing house, playing
Mm.
whatever silly games as a kid. I always wanted to be a woman. I wanted to wear the women's clothes from the dress up box. Um, but then I learned very quickly that that's not okay, and I
Yeah.
learned through the basically shame and ridicules of other people,
Yeah.
family and kids at school and that kind of stuff. And even just, you know, TV and media at the time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was kind of just a thing that got pushed so far down that I almost didn't realize it was there, but it was also like the deep, dark truth within that I was
Mm.
scared to face for so many years. And then I finally started to face it. And even that, it was just like to face it, it was almost like I needed limited exposure. So I needed to just experiment with things, experiment with makeup or clothing or um, you know like changing my pronouns was basically my way of alleviating a lot of the social gender dysphoria, I would say, because
Right.
I really, once I came to the realization, I would get very annoyed at being gendered male. I was just like, that's not me. I kind of lost it at this guy in the Vans store on Young one day. I was like, hey man, how are you doing? I was just like, why does it have to be man? Like, why?
Mm. It's also
He
like this
was
notion of
like,
saying
sorry.
guys all the time too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes I'm even like when someone says something, I'll say, "Oh boy," and then I get angry with myself. I'm like, "Why did I just say oh boy? Like
Yeah, why
why?"
is oh boy, oh man, like
Yeah,
why is that part of our vernacular? That it literally has nothing to do with gender. It's
yeah,
like an expression of interest or awe or exasperation, you know?
yeah, and it gets it gets people wound up a lot too because sometimes you're like, "I don't want to say hey guys." They're like, "But I don't care." Like I'll say this to a woman, and another woman will be like, "I don't care if you call me, if you say hey guys to me." But then
Yeah.
it's just like, but it's just like all this normalized stuff that we've done that allows us
Hmm.
to kind of ignore other people by only using certain words.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah, no, it's interesting because I have the completely opposite. I have a very similar. I guess it's similar to you, but in my own world, where I didn't like being a girl. I think I actually like I looked at the girls around me. I looked at the women around me when I was younger and I thought they were boring. They were always in the kitchen. Hated that. I looked at the boys and my male cousins and they were always having fun, playing with all the cool toys and I wanted nothing more than to do that. And but I never personally felt like it was weird. I mean, there was like I'd get into fights with boys. Boys would be like, "No, don't play with us. You're a girl," and I'd just
Yeah.
be like, "What? Why?" But it never made me, or I never thought to do anything more than that. And then yes, you having this conversation of what non-binary meant, and the fact that just because you have certain genitalia means that you have to present this way, and because I have certain genitalia, I have to have these certain qualifications, and not qualifications but characteristics and personality.
Yeah. Like people just have like a set of genitals comes with a massive set of expectations
Yeah,
within every culture.
and we don't
And
realize that we put that expectation
yeah,
on us.
yeah. This is why I hate gender reveals like more than pretty much anything in the world. It's like why are you throwing a party to basically categorize an unborn child and put a massive set of expectations on it?
Mm,
Because soon as that bubble is popped and there's blue confetti or pink confetti, basically your baby is subjected to that expectations from family and friends.
yeah.
They go out and buy the boy toys or the girl toys, and with no thought of what this child will actually be interested in, and no thought of offering a wide variety to them. Like, wouldn't it be
Mm,
wonderful if families just bought kids whatever, give the
yes.
kid a truck and a fake tool set and a Barbie and a, easy bake oven. Like, let them try things out.
Yeah, you actually, it's okay. So, this, what you're saying right now is when I listen to parents like, I just want to raise my child to be good and blah, blah, blah. The minute you start giving your kid certain toys or have them play in certain sports, you're in your eyes, you're not raising them to be who they want to be. You're raising them who you as parents want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, and I think I'm only starting to realize this now, but it's a really interesting conversation. I think parents they project themselves onto their kids instead of letting their kids be who they are.
Absolutely.
Oof. Okay. Well,
Absolutely. I think that's slowly changing. I think there are
yes.
a lot of great parents out there who are a lot more introspective about that kind of thing.
Well, I think it's also, where we've come into society too. Like our parents, I would say our parents and like the baby boomers, they were always told what to do. They never thought about this stuff. And mental
Yes.
health was never an issue. And they never thought to allow
Yeah.
other people to express themselves because they were living in this like survival mode.
Yeah.
And so I think now with our generation, we're not in survival mode anymore, but we're in like this, I don't know the mode that we're in. Maybe a little bit more of a compassionate mode.
Yeah.
We're moving
Yeah.
towards that at least. So
Mm-hmm.
it's allowing for these conversations and people to exist that don't necessarily conform to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm digressing. So how did it you were I hope that I'm not doing this bad, but you at the time of being non-binary, we worked together.
Yeah.
Did that was it weird with coworkers? Did you feel like you were ever not seen? I know that it's hard with pronouns. I struggled with pronouns too sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
um how was that part for you?
Um, yeah, it was definitely, yeah, pronouns are a struggle because that's asking people to not amend not only their language, but also how they see you or what their perception of you is, which,
Mhm.
I try not to worry too much about that. They may get the pronouns right, but then they call you dude. I don't know. And yeah, people are interesting with pronouns. Some people act like they want a prize when they get it right. And it's just like, no, you don't get that. It feels good. It feels nice to be
Uh-huh.
acknowledged and seen in that way, but it's also kind of like a bare minimum expectation because I don't have time for people who aren't going to
Pass the
even,
test.
yeah, like even just put in the tiniest bit of effort. Like, I'm not asking for a lot here, and I'm
Yeah.
not asking for any more than I would give myself to a person who is expressing themselves or identifying in a certain way.
I think because I know the struggle with me was that I'm so used to like cisgender people or like people their pronouns are if they look like a man, their pronouns are he, him. If they look like a woman, their pronouns are she, her. So I'm so used to that. It to me actually sometimes it felt like I was impressed with myself if because I don't generally work with you, and so I'd be so like I'd talk about everyone else, and then I would talk about you, and if I didn't struggle, which I think this probably sounds weird, but for me it was like I felt impressed with myself if I didn't struggle and I got your pronouns right each and every time. I was like, oh my god, yes, I'm like I feel like I'm doing. I feel like I'm moving towards the step in the right direction, but you're so used to it's just not it's not an easy concept,
Yeah.
but then you forget that like there's a person that you're talking to, and as much as I would like to not only be looked at as a woman all the time, I want to be looked at as a person.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remind yourself it's not easy because we don't have these conversations with cisgendered heterosexual people
Yeah.
that there are people differently than you.
Yeah.
um and so I, I guess was non-binary part of your transition, like trying to figure out who you were.
Yes. Yeah.
At, was there a defining moment, or was there like when did you realize that this wasn't enough, I needed to do more?
I think that was gradual. Um, a big help was shout out to Sherburne Health Center in
Mm.
Toronto. Um, they have a program called Gender Journeys. They have a bunch of great programs for trans and gender nonconforming people. But Gender Journeys was I want to say 8 or 12 week kind of program, and it was a set group of people. It wasn't a drop in. It was like there were, I think, 12 of us or so in that group, and we met weekly, and there were different topics that we would discuss and explore, from coming out to fashion to names to language. And there was a week about hormones and health, where you kind of got to learn the basics of, medically transitioning.
Hmm.
Um, and so that gave me a lot more language and a lot of concepts to kind of grasp onto. It was a lot less just kind of flailing about trying to figure stuff out as it felt wrong or right. And then I met a really good group of friends there. Like there are 5 of us who still keep in touch and
Nice.
have been a great kind of support system for each other. And I still keep in contact with them. So that's been lovely. I think that started to give me a clearer picture. And then it was just time. It was just time coming to realization about things. And like, this is the thing that bugs me about people saying, like, are you sure? Or just make sure you're positive about it before
Mm.
you do this or that. And I had people say that to me when I decided to medically transition and like
Yeah.
really um explore my truth, which was leading me to a slightly more binary space, which was
Yeah, it
also
does.
a lot easier for people. As much as there were second guessers, it's like a lot easier for people to wrap their head around a trans person who is just transitioning from one side of the binary to the other. And it's like, oh, they're just going from he, him pronouns to she, her pronouns. And I know how to treat women, so I will just treat this person like a woman now, which is
Hmm.
like a whole other complicated thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, why do you have this like flip you need to switch about how you treat women and men? But anyway,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I don't really actually remember when I finally decided to medically transition. Seeing my friends do it first, it
Yeah.
was a big help. I was kind of um, the latest bloomer in my little gender journeys gang of friends. A lot of them were 6 months to a year ahead of me in terms of going on to hormone replacement therapy, or looking at the various surgeries that
Mm.
people might get to express themselves the way they want to be. It was just kind of like easing into it. And oh, I was talking about people, second guessing you. And
Yes.
I don't know a trans person, and this may have happened because there are a lot of us out there, but I don't know a lot of trans people who make this decision lightly. And if it's getting to the point where I am telling you as a person, like, then I've done a lot of thinking about it. Like, so yes, I'm sure. And whether or not I'm sure, it's not somebody else's place to question it. It is absolutely not someone's place to say, well, oh, surgeries are irreversible and, that
Like
kind of
you've
thing.
never thought about that before.
Yeah, like I know, and like I think about it every day, and like it's not like it just clicked and I was like, "Yep, this is me. This is how I am. This is
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do." There was like every day, like, do I really want to do this? Like fear of giving up being so privileged as
Yeah.
a cis white male,
Yep.
changing who I was, and the uncertainty of what it's going to be like and how people are going to interact with me, how the world is going to interact with me. I don't make these kind of decisions lightly. I can be impulsive in other areas of my life, but this kind of thing, no.
Yeah, and I don't think you can. I think because I think about things. When you first told me you were transitioning, I said something that I probably should never have said to you, but it's in my simple-minded brain. My first thought and my only thought was like, oh my God, you want to give up your male privilege? Like, are you sure? Like, I would, and it's only because I think I come from like I think I have penis envy. I think I have male envy. I want to be, I don't like the, I don't want to say insubordination, but I don't like the way that I somehow feel at the bottom of the rung sometimes with how we
Yeah,
treat men and women.
yeah,
So for me, that was how I viewed it. And listening to you to speak, and also listening to more trans stories and listening and trying to do more, like I want to be more compassionate. I want to treat people like humans. um we're so used to in this society of, and maybe this is just like how like religion and how all that plays into things, but when people are gay, you're like, are you sure you're gay? And it's just like, no, I just woke up one day and decided to lie to the world that you're gay. Like we're so
yeah,
used to like, you sure you don't want to be like everyone else because we're so
yes,
scared of being different.
yeah,
I think that's really what it is.
totally.
And it is very interesting what you said about like that flip with how that, so now that you want to be a woman, I like, you're going to treat me differently. Like, is that how differently we treat men versus women? Like there's all
Totally.
these questions with gender, like that you just brought up, that it's kind of it's scary and it's crazy, but like we also just refuse to have these conversations because we just also like, oh, trans people are weird and we don't want to talk to them. We don't want to discuss them. We don't want them in our bathrooms. We don't want them here. But it's just like,
Yeah.
you have to accept them as people. They're here. And it also questions how you feel about yourself. Um, anyway, so now I think I'm
Hmm.
rambling on too, but it's also, I have conversations with people when I started telling people that I'm doing a podcast about sex and all this stuff. They always bring this up about like, oh, but but I don't understand trans people. Can you talk to me about that? And I'm like, I don't understand what that question means.
Mm.
But then they question, they're like, I don't understand why someone wakes up one day and decides that. And I'm like, I don't think that's how easy it is. But
Yeah.
also, can you imagine, like, I don't think I get made fun of a lot, but I probably get objectified because I may, like, I have boobs, or people may look at me differently because I'm brown. But I don't think anyone just wakes up and says, I want to be different without realizing the ramifications that you could be bullied more. You could
Hmm.
be, some people can make fun of you more. People, like, you're
Yes.
putting yourself out there in a public space and allowing more negativity to come into, because it
Absolutely.
will. It's not, that's not something people choose to do, that's not something people want to do, but the fact that you're willing to do it means that you have so much more strength and courage than I ever will, and most of us ever will.
Well, thank you.
And I think we need to look at that more.
And I think just it's about the drive to live your truth, because I
Yes.
know that I gave up a lot of privilege
Hmm.
And I I knew that my life was about to become a lot more uncomfortable in terms of how I moved in the world. You
Yeah.
know, the world was about to get a lot less safe for me. I also realized how ignorant I was and just how like privileged and entitled I was, because I was just like, whoa, this is how it is for women? Like
Yeah.
constant fear of being raped? Like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that I want to talk to you about. I don't know where I want to start. Um, I don't know if this is weird to say out loud, but like, would you consider non-binary part of your transition? Like it is a part of transitioning, like, oh, to see if this is where you would like to go. If you're
Yeah.
questioning your gender expression, you
Hmm.
could potentially go the non-binary or gender
Yep.
non-conforming route. Okay.
Hmm. For sure. And questioning is a gender identity too. Like
Fair.
it is like absolutely a valid state to be in, because you got to
Yeah,
figure it out somehow. And I'm
exactly.
certainly not going to ask someone to commit to a label when they're not sure of it. And that doesn't mean you have to stick with the old label, you know?
Yeah, that's true. It's not linear. It's very fluid. It can go wherever you like.
Yeah,
I forget that
totally.
too.
Hmm.
Okay, so when you decided to go is it medically transitioning if if you're using hormones, or is it like hormonally transitioning? I don't know if that's
Mm, I think both are probably accurate. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But I typically refer to it as medically transitioning,
okay,
which to me is hormones and or uh, surgeries.
right. As a cisgendered woman who has to deal with the menstrual cycle and hormones that change from estrogen to progesterone, I notice hormonal changes with me during my cycle. I am so curious to know how and if like what were the most noticeable changes, or what did you notice the most as you moved from decreasing testosterone levels and increasing female hormones?
Oh, good question. It's like myriad changes.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's the physical stuff. So for me, and it's so I take daily pills, and it's testosterone blockers and estrogen
Okay.
pills. You know, you start out small and increase over time. And um, okay, so things that happen are body hair is vastly reduced,
Hmm.
which was nice, because as I was transitioning, I'm like, wow, that body hair actually really was a great like amount of dysphoria for me. When I was like in my early 20s, I like shaved every inch of my body. Like I was
Oh,
just like that twink. But
yeah.
then I just honestly got so exhausted by it.
It's a lot. No, I trust me.
Yeah.
I understand. It's a lot of work.
And you know, I think it also speaks to the hair expectations on cis women too. Like a lot of
Yes. Yeah.
cis women are hairier than cis men can even handle to wrap
Oh,
their
yeah, and then
minds
you add on
around.
different yeah, if you add culture into it, like Indian
Hmm.
women, European women, we're hairy. I knew women that were shaving their face in elementary school
Yeah.
because they felt so disgusted by it and made fun of for it by too
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Body hair, skin becomes kind of softer, if that's a good way
Mm.
to describe it. I don't know how else to kind of define that. Doesn't get rid of your beard though, which is pretty brutal. So that you
Oh.
have to take care of yourself. I grew boobs, love my boobs. It
Yes.
was super like painful. It was very exciting. The like breast buds like start showing up under your nipples. And I don't know if this is what cis women go through like in puberty, but
Uh-huh.
basically, if you want to think of it this way, I went through a second puberty.
Yeah, you did. That's what it feels like.
That's exactly what it
Huh.
was. And like,
Interesting.
yeah, that little like painful edamame bean under my nipple.
Yeah.
but it was like, yay, they're growing. And then fat redistribution as well. So
Mm,
that affects your face, goes to more towards that kind of traditionally feminine look. Like it softens certain parts of your face. Fat deposits around your boobs and your hips and butt and stuff instead of other areas where it'll typically deposit for men. Oh, my hair. Testosterone kills hair. Like excessive testosterone as men age, that's why
oh,
they become bald on the top of their head,
oh,
but
all
hairier in the
these
rest of
things
their
I just
body.
don't think about. Okay.
But for me, like my like that almost dead hair, like my hairline moved forward because the like almost dead or dormant hairs were like coming to life. So my
Mm,
hair is like fuller, and that I love.
I don't blame you
um
for that.
Changes on the inside for sure. That stuff is a little harder to fully separate though because of other things I was doing and going through, right? Like when you start to accept yourself, when you have been doing years of therapy, you start to have less anxiety and deal with things
Yeah.
differently. And so it's not like it rewired my brain in the way I think, but it just like I was able to breathe a little more. Like testosterone just like I don't even know how to describe it.
Could you describe it as like
Aggro.
you?
It's an aggro like it's an
Yes, I was gonna say
aggressive
made you more aggressive.
hormone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like I'm just like a lot more chill and like a lot more, but again, is that the hormones or is that me finally liking the place I'm
Mm,
at in my life? It's
yeah.
hard to separate those. Um, uh, Hormone therapy usually makes you sterile, so had to go do the thing
Huh.
into a cup in case I ever wanted to have kids in the future with my own sperm, but I don't.
Right.
So that was really just money down the drain. But you never know.
You never
Uh,
know. I mean, maybe someone wants to come to you and be like, I want if I could have kids with your sperm, would you be okay with it? You never know. That could be an option too.
Yo, I've never even thought about that. I don't know how I'd
Mm-hmm.
feel. Um, but so nothing comes out anymore when I have a male, quote unquote, male orgasm.
Okay.
And
Huh.
it's not as satisfying. Do you want to get into like the nitty gritty sex
I
stuff?
I mean we could. I can edit it out if it's too much, but I feel like I know parts of this conversation and I
Yes.
I
Yeah.
I loved it. So,
Okay. Yeah. And then, I mean, so female orgasms is what I call them. This may be like totally an incorrect term, but I've known other trans people to call them female orgasms. I've described them to my cis women friends,
mm,
and they're
I
like,
remember this.
"Yeah, that's what orgasms are like
Yes,
for
yes.
us." Like I'm sure you and I have had this discussion.
We have.
And yeah, so that's wonderful to be able to have those now, um, through like penetrative sex mostly.
Can I ask you a question about those
Hmm.
orgasms that you have now? Is
Yeah,
it so I'm curious, a male orgasm versus a female orgasm that you've experienced.
yeah,
Is a female orgasm more like does it take over your entire body? Is it last a
absolutely,
lot longer?
for sure. Male orgasm is like a really, really satisfying sneeze. It's like feels really good, like just as it's about to happen, and then it happens, and then you're just kind of like, now I got snot all over myself.
That's a really good analogy. It's so annoying to
But
clean up.
like a female orgasm is like, I don't know, it's like a really good foot rub or massage or something where it's just like in terms of it could last forever, like
Yeah.
if the guy's doing the right stuff.
Mhm.
And I say the guy because I typically date cis men,
Okay.
but obviously
I mean, with
different
anyone,
people.
really. Yeah, if they
Yeah.
know what they were doing.
Yes. If you're being stimulated in the correct ways. But yeah, it's like, your whole body tenses up and becomes really hot. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a
Could you describe it
whole
as like
other
euphoric a little
wonderful
bit?
thing. For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a big thing. I think that's a magnificent thing. I never actually thought that there was a huge difference between male and female orgasms until I think we had this conversation and put my orgasms into perspective.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
Just because I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing. A female orgasm, you're not like spent and done and like in a different mood after it happens. Like you could keep going, you could do other things, switch gears a bit. Whereas I find, at least with me, with male orgasm, it's like once I came, I was just done.
Done.
And I
Yeah.
just like wanted to go eat or like watch cartoons. Like it wasn't.
That feels like most of my sexual experiences.
It's literally, I always just want the guys to leave after so I can order Domino's. That's just how it goes for me.
Are you still noticing changes now? Like how long have you been on testosterone blockers for?
I've been doing hormone replacement therapy, otherwise called
HRT. Okay.
HRT. It was October of 2019. So it'll be 3 years this October. And I think they say you plateau typically after 2 to 3 years. So I've kind of really slowed down in terms of seeing much for physical, mental, emotional changes. Oh, that's a thing that changed inside. And I think, again, it's hard to separate whether it's, the work I've been doing in therapy and, the move towards living my truth versus the hormones. But I cry a lot more now and I love to cry. It used to be like painful to cry and like stilted, like you were trying to get these tears up over a wall. But now it's just like I'll cry at like
Oh, yes.
commercials and like just random stuff. And I love it. I love to lean into a good
Yeah.
cry. Like Downton Abbey, when Sybil dies, like I'm like a weirdo because I'll go and watch that episode just to have a good cry because it's so good. It feels nice. It feels
There's something about
cleansing.
a good cry every now and then makes me feel so much better about
Yeah.
life. But now like this, I always thought of it just as toxic masculinity. We raise men to be like, you're not allowed to cry. You're supposed to be void of emotion. But now I'm curious to know if that's a lot in part to do with testosterone or your hormones also.
Oh yeah, I think it is. I think it
Oof.
is. I know trans men or trans masculine folks who one of the group leaders at Gender
Uh-huh.
Journeys was trans masculine, and they would tell us how they really missed their tears. They missed crying. It's
Oh,
like it just doesn't come out the same way. Um,
wow.
yeah, isn't that interesting?
The things that you learn. I truthfully think that people that are trans have a really unique outlook on life. I value that outlook and I wish we could all listen to it more because it really does, to me, in my mind, it speaks to how, like, I don't know if this is weird to say, you've experienced one sex and now you've experienced two sexes in your lifetime and how
Mm-hmm.
you were
Mm-hmm.
perceived and how they treated you. And I know you may not get the best experiences on either end, but like just in hormones and how your body is alone, it's a real journey that is only something that you have that we will never know.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I'm sorry. That part, it just makes me I'm so curious about that. And I love exploring that more, but, we don't have
Mm-hmm.
to continue talking about it because then this will just be for me instead of for our listeners.
I mean, I'm enjoying it. So wherever you want to go, doll.
Stay tuned for part 2 coming next week. I'll see you next Tuesday with the second part of my conversation with Diana. I would like to thank you for tuning in today. Download, leave a review, follow, and share this episode and the podcast with your friends, family, really whomever you like. You can find me on Just Curiosity Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and you can email me at justcuriositypod@gmail.com, as I would absolutely love to know your thoughts, insights, comments, and all those juicy stories. But most of all, stay curious, friends. I'm Shelly D, and this has been Just Out of Curiosity.